The human stood in the grand alien throne room, his boots echoing on the black stone floor. The ceiling stretched high above him, covered in glowing crystals that pulsed like beating hearts. Alien guards lined the sides, their tall bodies covered in silver armor, sharp spears in their hands, eyes fixed on him with open hatred. He had fought their kind on the battlefield, and now he was dragged before their ruler like a prisoner. At the far end of the hall, on a throne of dark metal and glowing vines, sat the alien queen. She was 8 feet tall, her violet skin glowing faintly, her silver crown carved like blades. Her golden eyes studied him with cold curiosity. The hall fell silent as her voice filled the air, deep and commanding. "Human," she said, "you stand before me. Give me one reason I should not order your execution." The human's throat felt dry. He had survived war, fire, and blood. But this? He was only one man in a hall full of enemies. He looked at her, at the way her nobles whispered, eager to see him die. He thought of how ridiculous it all was, that one tired soldier, scarred and beaten, was now judged by a queen of a race that saw humans as weak. Something inside him cracked. He was exhausted, broken, and desperate to laugh at fate. A smile tugged at his lips, and he spoke without thinking. "Be my wife?" The words came out half a joke, half a desperate attempt to break the tension. For a moment, the sound seemed to vanish into the massive chamber. Then, silence. Complete silence. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The nobles froze. Guards' eyes widened. The alien court stared at him as though he had spoken forbidden magic. The queen did not move. Her golden eyes locked on him, unblinking. Her face was unreadable, as if carved from stone. The human shifted uneasily, chuckling nervously. "Just kidding," he muttered, but the sound of his voice felt small, swallowed by the silence. Then the queen rose slowly from her throne. Her height made her shadow stretch across the floor until it touched his boots. She descended the steps with a grace that was both terrifying and beautiful. Every step echoed like thunder. When she stopped in front of him, the hall seemed to hold its breath. "You dare?" she whispered, but her voice was not angry. It was heavy, full of meaning he could not understand. Her hand rose, sharp claws glinting in the light. For a second, he thought she might cut his throat. Instead, she touched her chest, where her heart beat. Her voice rang out, clear and powerful. "A pact of honor has been spoken." The hall erupted. Nobles gasped and shouted, their voices a storm of disbelief. Some dropped to their knees, others screamed in anger. The guards slammed their spears against the ground in ritual rhythm. The human blinked in confusion, trying to understand what had just happened. "What? No, wait, what did I just do?" he stammered, looking around. One of the nobles, his face twisted with fury, pointed at him. "The human has invoked the queen's vow. He cannot escape now." The queen's eyes never left his. "You have asked, and I have accepted. Before this court, before the ancestors, and before the law of my people, you are bound to me." The human felt his stomach drop. His joke had just turned into something he could not control. He tried to laugh again, but the sound died in his throat when he saw the guards kneel to him. Kneel? To him? "Wait," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I didn't mean." But the queen silenced him with a single raised hand. "Mean or not, your words are binding. My people do not play with honor. You have spoken, human, and by speaking, you have claimed me." His heart raced. Claimed? He looked at the queen, at the court full of glaring eyes, and realized the weight of his words. To them, this was not a joke. To them, this was law, ancient and unbreakable. He had not just asked her to marry him. He had sealed a pact. The queen turned, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Let it be known, this human is no longer a prisoner. He is no longer an enemy. He is bound by honor, by vow, by law. He is mine." The human felt his knees weaken. He wanted to protest, to explain, but the sound of the crowd drowned him out. Some shouted with rage, demanding his death. Others bowed with respect, forced by tradition. But no one dared challenge the queen's word. Her eyes softened slightly as she looked at him again, just for a moment, as if she saw something even she did not expect. Then her expression hardened once more. She raised her hand, and the hall fell silent again. "Take him," she commanded. "Treat him as one of royal blood. Guard him well, for he belongs to your queen now." The guards who had once dragged him like a prisoner now stepped forward and bowed, waiting for him to follow. The human's chest tightened. His joke had become a chain around his neck, and he could not break it. As they led him away, he glanced back at the queen. She was watching him with an expression he could not read, part curiosity, part triumph, part something deeper. He felt the walls of the palace close in around him. He had entered this hall as a soldier, expecting death. Instead, with one foolish joke, he had become bound to the most powerful alien in the galaxy. And as the doors closed behind him, one thought echoed in his mind. What have I done? The human woke the next morning in a chamber he never expected. The walls glowed with soft blue light, the floor covered in carpets that looked like woven silk. A table stood near his bed, filled with strange fruits and crystal glasses of water that shimmered like liquid stars. This was no prison cell. This was a royal chamber, yet he did not feel free. 2 alien guards stood outside the door, their silver armor shining, their long spears crossed, so no one could enter without permission. He had seen those same guards drag him across the battlefield days ago. Now they bowed slightly when he stepped out, but their eyes were still full of cold warning. He was not a prisoner anymore, but neither was he truly free. As he walked down the endless corridors of the palace, he noticed how every alien he passed stopped to stare. Some bowed reluctantly, lowering their heads because law forced them. Others glared openly, hatred in their eyes. The whispers followed him everywhere. The human bound our queen. How could she accept? He is not worthy. Their voices dripped with disgust, but none dared to speak too loud. Finally, he was brought to the great council chamber. Alien nobles, dressed in robes glowing with jewels, filled the room. Their faces were sharp, proud, and angry. When he entered, the whispers turned into angry hisses. At the far end sat the queen on her throne, calm and unshaken, as though she had been waiting for him. One noble, tall and heavy, slammed his hand on the table. This is madness. A human cannot share our queen's honor. He is weak, unfit, unworthy. Another noble nodded fiercely. The pact must be undone. If he remains, it will shame us before all our allies. The queen's golden eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting I dishonor my vow? Her voice was calm, but the power behind it made the hall tremble. The nobles fell silent for a moment, but their anger still boiled. The human shifted uneasily. He raised his hands. Listen, maybe there's been a mistake. I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't serious. The queen's gaze cut to him like a blade, silencing him instantly. Do not speak of dishonor, human. Words are not light in my kingdom. Once spoken, they are chains. He swallowed hard, realizing again that in this world, a joke was heavier than a promise. The queen rose slowly. The entire council lowered their heads as she stood, her crown catching the light. She spoke so all could hear. He is bound to me. The pact of honor cannot be broken. Not by me, not by him, not by anyone. The law is older than all of us. To break it would bring ruin. The nobles hissed, some pounding their fists against the tables. But none dared argue further. They were trapped by their own traditions. The queen turned her eyes to the human again, softer this time, but still sharp. You are no longer a prisoner of war. You will be treated as royal blood. You will sit by my side. But know this, human, every eye will be on you. Every mistake will be judged. Some will wish you dead. Some will try to make it so. Her words sank into him like heavy stones. He looked around at the glaring nobles, their faces full of hatred. He realized that though the guards no longer chained him, invisible chains now bound him tighter than ever. That evening, a servant brought him to the dining hall. The long table stretched across the golden chamber, filled with alien foods steaming with strange scents. Nobles filled the seats, their cold eyes fixed on him. He was seated near the queen herself. Her presence was calm, regal, untouchable. She did not eat much. She only studied him quietly, as though measuring his worth. The nobles began their attack, not with weapons, but with words. Tell us, human, one sneered, how does your weak kind survive war without running? Another laughed, lifting a silver cup. Does your fragile body not break in the cold of space? The human clenched his jaw. He wanted to snap back, to tell them how many humans had died fighting, how many had bled just to stand in this hall today. But he remembered the queen's warning. Every mistake would be judged. So he stayed calm, answering slowly, carefully. Humans don't survive because we are strong, he said. We survive because we don't give up. Even when everything is against us, we keep moving forward. A few nobles laughed mockingly, but others shifted uncomfortably, as though his words carried truth they could not deny. The queen's lips curved slightly, almost like a hidden smile. The meal ended in silence. When the human left the hall, he felt the stairs burning into his back. He knew then that he was walking on a blade's edge. If he slipped even once, the nobles would tear him apart. Later that night, as he stood by the window of his chamber, looking at the alien city glowing under two moons, he realized his life was no longer his own. He had become part of something much bigger, a world where every step mattered, where every word carried weight. He thought of the queen's eyes, the way she looked at him with a mix of challenge and curiosity. She had claimed him, yes, but in truth, it felt as though she was testing him. She wanted to see if a human could stand in her world without breaking. The human clenched his fists. He had made a joke, and now he was bound by it. But he was not going to bow. If this world wanted him to prove himself, he would. And deep down, a small voice whispered inside him. Perhaps this was not a mistake after all. Perhaps fate had chosen him for something greater. Still, as the night grew colder, he could not ignore the heavy truth. He was both a guest and a prisoner. Loved by none, watched by all. Every step forward would either bring him closer to honor or to death. The next morning, the human was woken by the sound of heavy footsteps outside his chamber. The door opened, and two guards stepped in, their spears gleaming in the light. Without a word, they gestured for him to follow. He frowned, his body still aching from wounds not fully healed, but he knew refusing was not an option. He followed them through the long halls until they reached the throne chamber once again. The queen sat upon her throne, her golden eyes calm but sharp, her voice echoing across the hall. "Human," she said, "you spoke words that bound us, but words are nothing without proof. My people doubt you, my nobles whisper against you. They will only be silenced if you can pass the trials of worth." The human's heart sank. Trials? He had heard the word before, back in the war, whispers among soldiers about alien rituals. No one had survived them. What kind of trials? He asked carefully. The queen rose to her feet, her presence towering, her crown glowing faintly in the dim light. "Strength, wisdom, and loyalty," she answered. "3 trials, each older than the throne itself. Fail them, and not even I can protect you. Pass them, and no voice in this court will dare challenge the Pact of Honor." The hall erupted in murmurs. Nobles smirked, their eyes glinting with cruel excitement. They wanted to see him fail. They wanted him dead. The human clenched his jaw. He had no choice. "Fine," he said. "I'll do it." The first trial was set in the arena. A circular pit made of black stone, surrounded by roaring nobles, their voices rising like thunder. The queen sat on a high balcony, watching with a face that revealed nothing. The human stood at the center, stripped of armor, given only a dull blade. Across from him, the gate opened with a thunderous clang. Out stepped a beast unlike anything he had ever seen. 10 feet tall, covered in armored scales, its mouth filled with rows of teeth. The nobles cheered as the creature roared. The human tightened his grip on the blade. His body was small compared to the beast, his strength nothing compared to its monstrous power. But he remembered the queen's words. Strength was not only in the body. He crouched, waiting. The beast charged, its footsteps shaking the ground. At the last second, the human rolled aside, letting it smash into the stone wall. Dust rained down as the creature roared in anger. He could not fight it head-on. He had to be clever. Each time the beast charged, he dodged, letting it crash into walls, sharp stones cutting its scaled hide. The nobles booed, calling him a coward. But slowly the creature weakened. Its movements slowed, its roars turned into pained growls. At last, the human climbed onto its back, driving the dull blade into the softer flesh between its armored plates. With a final cry, the beast collapsed. The arena fell silent. Then, from the balcony, the queen raised her hand. The first trial is complete. The nobles muttered angrily, some looking away in shame. The human stood in the pit, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face, but his eyes locked on the queen. For the first time, he thought he saw pride in her gaze. The second trial came at dusk. This time, there was no beast, no weapon, no arena. Instead, he was led into a hall filled with riddles, puzzles, and traps. Strange glowing stones floated in the air, forming patterns that changed when touched. Paths twisted into dead ends, doors sealed shut when wrong choices were made. Nobles and scholars gathered to watch from balconies above, eager to see him fail. The voice of the queen echoed from the shadows. This is the trial of wisdom. Find the path to the throne chamber. Choose wrongly, and you will remain here forever. The human's heart pounded. He was no scholar, no genius, but he remembered his days as a soldier. War had taught him to read patterns, to notice what others missed. He studied the glowing stones, noticing how their colors shifted like stars. Slowly, carefully, he pressed them in order, creating a path. When he reached a locked door, he noticed the floor tiles formed a map. The wrong step triggered arrows from the walls, but his instincts saved him, guiding his feet. Hours passed, sweat rolling down his face, his body aching, but he never stopped moving forward. Step by step, he solved the alien puzzles, until finally, the great door opened. He stumbled out into the throne chamber once again, exhausted but alive. The queen watched from her throne, her eyes glimmering faintly. "The second trial is complete," she declared. The nobles fell silent. Their whispers grew uneasy now. Twice he had survived. Twice he had proven them wrong. But the hardest test came last. The trial of loyalty. The human was led into a quiet courtyard at night. A fire burned at the center, torches flickering around it. The queen stood there, her crown set aside, her eyes locked on his. "This is the final trial," she said softly. "The trial of loyalty. To pass it, you must stand by me even when the world turns against you. Tonight, you will be tempted. You will be offered freedom, power, and safety. Refuse, and you will belong to me truly. Accept, and our bond will be broken." Before he could answer, shadows moved around him. Nobles stepped forward, cloaked in darkness. One offered him a blade. "End her life, human. Do this, and we will grant you your freedom, your ship, your return to your people." Another whispered, "Take our gold, take our power, betray her, and you will rule beside us." The human stared at them. His heart raced. Freedom was all he had wanted since he arrived. To go home, to leave this madness behind. Yet as he looked at the queen, standing tall despite knowing her life was in his hands, something inside him shifted. He remembered her words, her warning, her strange gaze of trust. He realized she was not just a queen of cold honor. She was someone trapped, like him, bound by duty. He dropped the blade. His voice was steady. "No, I won't betray her. Not now, not ever." The queen's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking through her mask. Then she nodded slowly, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "The third trial is complete." The nobles hissed in fury, but they could not deny the law. The human had passed all three trials. He had proven strength, wisdom, and loyalty. No one could speak against him now. As the guards led him back to his chambers, his body weak but his spirit burning, he realized the truth. He had come here as a joke, bound by words he never meant. But now he was bound by choice. And deep in his heart, he knew. This was only the beginning. The palace was quieter after the trials, but the silence felt heavy, dangerous. The human walked through the long corridors, his body sore but his mind restless. Everywhere he went, he felt eyes on him. Servants bowed quickly, nobles turned their faces away, and guards watched his every move. Outwardly, he had won respect. He had passed the tests, proved himself before the queen and her people. But in the shadows, whispers grew sharper. At night, in his chamber, he often heard muffled voices outside his door. Sometimes the sound of footsteps lingered too long. Sometimes he saw shadows move where no one should have been. He knew what it meant. Many wanted him gone. The queen had declared the pact unbreakable, but not all would obey her will. One evening, as he stood at his window staring at the glowing alien city, a faint creak came from behind him. He turned just in time to see a figure slip through his door. The intruder moved fast, holding a blade curved like a claw. The human threw himself to the side as the weapon slashed past his chest. He grabbed a chair and swung it with all his strength, knocking the attacker back. Before he could chase, the figure leapt through the window and vanished into the night. His chest burned with fear. This was not a test. This was an assassination. Someone wanted him dead, trials or no trials. The next morning, guards escorted him to the throne chamber again. The queen sat tall on her throne, her crown shining in the torchlight. She studied him closely, her sharp golden eyes noticing the cut on his tunic. "You fought in the night," she said quietly, not asking but declaring. The human stiffened. "Someone tried to kill me, in your palace." A murmur spread across the nobles. Some looked away, others smirked as if pleased. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell. She leaned forward, her eyes glowing faintly. "You are alive?" That means you fought well. He frowned. That's all you have to say? They're trying to kill me. For a moment, her cold mask cracked, her voice lowered so only he could hear. You are bound to me. If you die, I lose honor, I lose power. They know this. That is why they strike at you. Her eyes softened slightly. Be cautious, human. Do not trust anyone but me. Those words stayed with him. Do not trust anyone but her. The following days grew more tense. At meals, he noticed how certain nobles watched him too closely. Once, a servant brought him a goblet of wine. The queen, without looking at him, raised her hand and ordered the servant to drink first. The servant froze, then spilled the wine onto the floor in fake clumsiness before hurrying away. The message was clear. It had been poisoned. The human's heart raced. Each day felt like walking on thin ice. At night, he lay awake, listening for footsteps. In the day, he forced himself to stand tall, to answer nobles with calm words, never showing fear. But deep inside, fear gnawed at him. He was a stranger in a deadly court, surviving only because of the queen's protection. Yet, something about the queen puzzled him. She was not just protecting him out of duty. He saw it in small moments. The way her eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking. The way she interrupted nobles who mocked him too harshly. The way she tested him with questions during council meetings, as though trying to know his heart. One evening, after another long day of whispers and cold stares, she summoned him to her private garden. The place was silent, filled with glowing plants and soft fountains. She stood by a tree with silver leaves, the moonlight reflecting on her face. You wonder why I accepted your words, she said without turning to him. He hesitated. Every day. Her gaze stayed on the sky. I am a queen. I am feared, obeyed, but I am not trusted. Even among my nobles, betrayal lives in every shadow. Yet when you stood before me, unarmed, unbroken, you spoke without fear. Foolish words, yes, but honest. In this court of liars, your honesty was different. He blinked, unsure how to answer. For the first time, he saw not just a ruler, but a woman carrying a heavy crown, a woman who lived surrounded by daggers pointed at her back. She turned then, her golden eyes soft but serious. They will not stop, human. They will come again and again. They will try to tear you from me. But if you endure, if you survive, they will bow in the end. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening. And if I don't? Her voice was low, steady, almost like a vow. Then I will fight for you myself. That night, as he returned to his chamber, the human felt something he could not explain. Fear still pressed on him, but there was also something else, a strange bond forming between him and the queen. She was dangerous, powerful, and surrounded by enemies. Yet she had chosen him. And now, despite everything, he felt a part of him beginning to choose her too. But he knew the danger was far from over. Every shadow in the palace might hide another blade. Every goblet might hold poison. Every noble's smile might mask a plot. And deep down, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The real trial had not ended with the arena or the puzzles. The real trial was surviving the queen's court itself. The night was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that pressed down heavy, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. The human lay in his chamber, staring at the ceiling, his body tense. For days, he had lived with whispers, poison attempts, and shadows moving in the dark. He thought he was ready for anything, but nothing could prepare him for what was coming. A sudden crash shook the air. The sound of shouting echoed through the hallways. He leapt from his bed and grabbed the short blade left for him by the guards. Outside, the ground shook again, followed by the unmistakable roar of fire. He rushed to the window, his widening as he saw it. The palace walls were under attack. Flames rose against the dark sky, smoke twisting upward as armed rebels poured through broken gates. The door to his chamber burst open. A guard stumbled in, blood dripping from his shoulder. "The Queen!" the guard gasped. "They are here for her." The human didn't hesitate. He pushed past the guard, racing down the corridors lit by fire. The sound of battle filled the palace, clashing steel, screams, the crackle of burning wood. The air was hot, choking with smoke. His heart pounded. Somewhere ahead, the queen was in danger. He turned a corner and froze. Rebels, cloaked in black, stormed through the hallway. Their eyes glowed with hatred, their blades dripping with blood. They saw him and charged. He had no armor, no army at his side, only the dull blade in his hand. Still, he stood his ground. The first rebel swung high. The human ducked, slashing across the man's arm before kicking him into the wall. Another came from behind, but the human spun, blocking the strike and shoving his blade into the attacker's stomach. Blood sprayed across the floor. His arms shook, his breath ragged, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He fought his way through, his body cut and bruised, but each step took him closer to the throne chamber. The palace groaned under the weight of fire, the walls trembling. When he finally reached the great doors, he heard the sound of battle inside. He shoved the doors open. The sight froze his blood. The queen stood in the center, her crown knocked to the ground, her long robe torn. Around her, rebels circled like wolves. She fought with her bare hands, claws flashing, her golden eyes burning with fury. But even she could not hold against so many. Without thinking, the human charged. He slammed into one rebel, knocking him aside, then swung his blade at another, forcing him back. The queen turned, surprise flickering in her eyes as she saw him. "What are you doing here?" she shouted. "Keeping my vow," he yelled back, blocking another strike. The two of them fought back to back. She moved with deadly grace, her claws tearing through armor. He moved with desperate speed, his blade flashing in the firelight. Together, they cut down the rebels one by one. The chamber echoed with the sound of steel, the cries of the dying, and the crackle of flames. But more poured in. The nobles who had plotted against them had chosen this night to strike. The rebels were endless. The human's arms ached, his body screaming with pain, but still he fought. Sweat and blood dripped down his face. His blade grew heavy, but he refused to let go. At last, the tide began to turn. The queen struck down the leader of the rebels with a single fierce blow, her claws tearing through his chest. The others hesitated, fear in their eyes. The humans seized the moment, slashing at their ranks, forcing them back. One by one, they broke, fleeing into the shadows. The throne chamber fell silent again, the floor slick with blood, the air heavy with smoke. The human dropped to his knees, his chest heaving, his blade clattering to the ground. He was covered in cuts, his body trembling from exhaustion. The queen stood over him, her chest rising and falling, her robe stained with blood. Slowly, she bent down, her golden eyes locking on his. "You saved me," she said softly, almost in disbelief. He forced a weak smile. "Couldn't let them take you. Not after all this." For a long moment, she studied him, her fierce mask breaking. In her eyes, there was something new, something warmer, almost fragile. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You are no longer just bound by words, human. Tonight, you proved your honor with blood." The nobles who had hidden during the fight now crept into the chamber, their faces pale. They had watched everything. They had seen him stand beside their queen when they themselves had fled. Their whispers filled the air, but this time, their voices were not filled with mockery. They spoke of him with awe, with fear, with reluctant respect. The queen rose, her voice echoing through the hall. "Let it be known. The human fought at my side and saved my life. His place beside me is not a mistake, not a joke, but a truth written in fire and blood. He is mine, and none may deny it." The chamber fell silent. No one dared to challenge her words. The human sat there, breathing hard, realizing what had just happened. He had come into this palace as a prisoner, bound by a foolish joke. But tonight, in the fire and chaos, he had become something else. As the guards rushed in to secure the throne room, the queen leaned closer, her voice low, meant only for him. "From this night, you are not just my bond by law, you are my bond by choice." The human closed his eyes, exhausted but alive, her words echoing in his mind. He had faced death for her, and she had claimed him not as duty, but as something more. And deep inside, despite the danger, despite the blood, he felt a truth rising. He would never walk away from her now. The palace was rebuilt slowly after the night of fire, but the scars remained. Burned walls were repaired, broken gates replaced, but the memory of blood did not fade. The human felt it every time he walked through the halls. The nobles bowed now, but their eyes still burned with hatred. The queen had declared him her chosen bond, yet he knew many wanted him gone. One morning, he was summoned to the council chamber. The long table was filled with nobles in glittering robes, their faces tight with anger. The queen sat at the head, calm but unreadable. As the human entered, whispers rose like a storm. Finally, one noble stood, his voice sharp. "The pact has gone too far. A human cannot stand at the side of our queen. He is not one of us. The law binds her, but not us. He should be given a choice. The queen's eyes narrowed. What choice? The noble sneered, his gaze fixed on the human. Freedom. Let him leave. If he walks away, the bond will be broken. If he stays, then he chooses this life, and he must carry the burden as her equal. The chamber fell silent. The human froze. Freedom. The word struck him like lightning. He could walk away. He could leave the poisoned food, the whispered threats, the blades in the dark. He could return to his own kind, live a life far from alien thrones and endless danger. The queen turned to him, her golden eyes steady but unreadable. It is true. You may go. No chains will stop you. No guards will drag you back. But if you stay, you will be mine in truth. Not by accident. Not by joke. By choice. The weight of her words pressed down on him. He looked around the chamber, at the nobles glaring with hatred, at the guards shifting uneasily, at the queen sitting tall yet alone. He thought of the nights she had warned him, of the way she stood with him in battle, of the moment she whispered he had saved her. She was powerful, feared, untouchable. Yet behind her golden eyes he had seen loneliness, the kind he knew too well. He could walk away. He should walk away. Yet something inside him refused. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. I stay. The nobles erupted in outrage, shouting, slamming fists against the table. Some screamed that it was betrayal to their kind. Others demanded his execution. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell like a blade. Her voice cut through the chamber, sharp and unyielding. He has chosen. He is bound to me not by accident, but by will. From this moment, he stands as my equal. The words struck the chamber like thunder. The nobles stared in shock. Equal. No one had ever stood equal to the queen, not even her own kind. For her to declare a human equal was unthinkable. The human felt the weight of their stares, but he stood tall, refusing to look away. He had made his choice. He would not bow or run. Later, in the quiet of the queen's private chambers, she dismissed the guards and faced him alone. Her voice was softer now, but still edged with steel. Do you understand what you have done? By choosing to stay, you have painted a target on your back. They will not stop. They will hate you more than ever. He met her eyes, his voice calm. I know, but I also know something else. You need someone you can trust. And maybe I need someone too. For the first time, her mask of cold strength cracked. A faint smile touched her lips, fragile but real. You are either very brave human or very foolish, he chuckled. Maybe both. Days turned into weeks. The queen kept him close, involving him in council meetings, asking his thoughts on war and peace, testing his judgment. At first, the nobles mocked him, but slowly they began to notice something. The humans' ideas were strange, simple compared to their complex strategies, yet they often worked. He suggested new ways of defending the palace, ways to rebuild burned villages faster, ways to treat servants with fairness instead of cruelty. The queen listened, and sometimes even smiled when his words surprised her court. That frightened the nobles more than his blade ever could. The queen was not only protecting him, she was valuing him. But danger did not fade. One evening, as the council dispersed, a noble brushed past him, whispering coldly, "Enjoy your throne, human. It will not last." The human kept walking, his jaw tight, but inside he knew the truth. He had chosen this life. He had chosen her. And now, every step forward was war. That night, as he stood by the balcony, the queen joined him silently. The city glowed under the moons, quiet for once. She looked at him with eyes that carried both power and exhaustion. You could have walked away, she said softly. He looked back at her. I didn't want to. For a long moment, they said nothing, only watching the city together. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was something else, something unspoken but strong. And deep inside, the human realized that this was no longer about a joke, no longer about survival. It was about choice. His choice. And though the path ahead was full of danger, he knew one thing with certainty. He would not regret it. The great hall was filled with light, but the air was heavy with tension. Nobles, soldiers, and servants crowded the chamber, their faces tight with unease. At the far end, the queen stood tall on her throne, her crown glinting under the crystal lamps. Beside her, the human stood straight, his heart pounding, though he tried not to show it. Today was the day. Today, the pact would be sealed before the galaxy. For weeks, whispers had spread through the empire. Some said the queen had gone mad. Others said the human had bewitched her. Many expected this day would end in blood. He felt their eyes on him now, burning, judging, waiting. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell across the hall. Her golden eyes swept over her people, sharp as blades. You have doubted, you have whispered, you have plotted, but today there will be no more questions. Today, the pact of honor is sealed. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The human felt every muscle in his body tense. His mouth was dry, but he stood firm. One noble could not stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage. This cannot be. He is not one of us. He is an outsider, a human. If you do this, you shame the blood of our ancestors. The queen's gaze turned on him, cold and deadly. Then challenge him. If his blood is unworthy, spill it before us all. If you dare. The hall erupted in murmurs. The human's heart thudded. A challenge. He had faced beasts, trials, assassins, but now he would face a noble in open combat, before the eyes of all. The noble sneered, drawing his curved blade. Gladly. The floor cleared, leaving only the human and the noble standing in the center of the hall. The queen's eyes never left them. Fight, she commanded. The noble charged first, his blade flashing in the light. The human barely dodged, the steel cutting across his arm. Pain burned, but he gritted his teeth and held his ground. The noble struck again and again, each blow heavy, fueled by hatred. The human stumbled back, blocking with desperate speed, his smaller frame struggling against the alien's strength. But he remembered his trials. Strength was not about size, it was about survival. He dodged another strike, letting the noble's blade smash into the stone floor. Sparks flew. The human kicked hard, sending the noble staggering. The hall roared with voices, some cheering for the noble, others gasping in shock. The human's breathing was ragged, his body screaming with pain, but he refused to fall. He pressed forward, using speed over power, striking where the noble's armor was weakest. At last, the noble raised his blade high for a killing strike. The human rolled under it and drove his own blade deep into the noble's chest. The noble gasped, eyes wide, before collapsing to the ground. Silence fell. The human stood over him, blood dripping from his blade, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked up at the queen. Her eyes glowed fiercely. She raised her hand. The pact stands. The human has proven his worth, not once, not twice, but again and again. He is mine, by law, by honor, by choice. The nobles bowed their heads, some in shame, some in fear. None dared to speak against her now. The guards struck their spears against the ground in rhythm, a sound that echoed like thunder through the chamber. The queen stepped down from her throne, walking toward him. She stopped in front of him, her height towering, but her eyes softer than they had ever been. Slowly, she reached out and touched his blood-stained hand. Her voice lowered, meant only for him. Your joke has become destiny. He managed a weak smile, despite the pain. Guess I'll have to live with it. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned to the court. Her voice rang like steel. From this day forward, he is not prisoner, not outsider. He is bound to me as king. His blood is my blood. His life is my life. And any who dare challenge this bond, challenge me. The hall shook with the weight of her words. No one moved. No one spoke. The nobles who once plotted against him now lowered their heads in silence. The rebellion of whispers had ended. Later, when the hall had emptied and the night was quiet, the humans stood alone with her on the balcony. The city glowed below them, moons hanging bright in the sky. The queen removed her crown, setting it aside, and for the first time she looked not like a ruler, but like a woman free of her armor. You could have left, she said softly, her voice almost vulnerable. But you stayed, even when it meant your death. He looked at her, tired but certain. I stayed because I wanted to, not because of honor, not because of law, because of you. For a moment she said nothing. Then she reached out, her hand finding his. Her golden eyes shimmered, no longer cold but warm with something unspoken. And as they stood together under the light of 2 moons, the human realized the truth. What began as a joke had turned into a bond stronger than war, stronger than fear, stronger even than the hate of her people. He had entered her world as a fool, but he would remain as her equal, her protector, her chosen. The galaxy would remember this day, the day a human stood beside an alien queen, not as enemy, not as captive, but as king.